Begin the Quran Daf Mesech Bava Metzia Daf Lamed Beis. Begin 12 lines down at the top of the Yamid, where the continue with the halacha. The next Mishnah, continuing from the theme of the previous Mishnah regarding what is considered naveda, our Mishnah also qualifies that idea about what would be considered as naveda and what would not be considered naveda. This corresponds to today's daf. And throughout the entire world. Discussing today's daf are matzah b'refes. If you find an animal in a barn, so then you're not obligated to be busy with it. You find it in the street, you are. The Gemara is going to qualify where is this barn, what's the status of the barn. Now, what happens if the lost object was in the cemetery and you're a kohen? So lo yitamalo, you don't make yourself tummy to return it. The Mishnah also discusses the mitzvahs of pre-cantina, which we mentioned in passing in the previous daf, unloading and loading an animal, which park baton to unload and load the animal, even if you did it 4 or 5 times, you're still chayiv. But halach v'yashav, if the owner is sitting there and he's like, you have a mitzvah, go do it, then you're pater. But if he was a sick person, an elderly person, then you would be chayiv because he simply can't do it. The halacha that prika b'chinam, unloading, everyone agrees it has to be done for free. But the machlek is regarding loading the animal if he has to do it for free or if you actually have to pay him to do that mitzvah of loading of the animal. And the Gemara discusses regarding a machlek is if tzar b'lechem deraisa is painting a living creature, a biblical prohibition or only a rabbinic. So begin the current daf, we begin the Mishnah. Matzah b'refes. If you find an animal in a barn, says the Mishnah, in the chayba. So the Gemara is going to explain why is that necessary to say, obviously walking in someone's house and he's in the barn, why would you think that you would have an obligation to be busy with that? But b'shus ram, if you find the animal in the street, chayba, then you're obligated to return it. Now, the ma'aseh b'veisek kvaris, if the item was in a cemetery and he's a kohen, he does not make himself tummy to that item. And even if his father tells him, look, he tummy, I want you to become tummy. It's a kind deed. You know, his father's not so religious. And he says, you realize someone's money is over here, you're too overly righteous here, this is wrong, this is a mistake. Or the father says, no, I'll tax it. Let's say it's a place where he's permitted to go over there. The father says, I don't want you to return this. You don't listen to the father regarding violating halacha. Now, moreover, continuing now on the theme, similar to the halacha of Hashavas Aveda regarding saving a Jew's money, so parak v'time, regarding unloading an animal or loading an animal, parak v'time, again, he unloaded an animal, he loaded an animal, even 4 or 5 times, still chayiv, you're still obligated. Shneimah says in the pasuk in Shemais, azav taziv, which, if you recall, it's not learned out from the extra word taziv. It's actually learned from the word azav, which means even 100 times. Taziv was teaching you something else. But that's what the pasuk teaches you even 100 times. Now, but if halach v'yashav loy, but if let's say the owner he walks away and he sits down. Somebody says like this, look, you have a mitzvah to unload my animal. If you want to unload, go ahead, do the mitzvah, but I'm sitting here, I'm going to watch. Pater, the stranger is exempt. Shlomo says the pasuk, imay. Azav tazav imay, you have to help him. He's not doing it, you have an obligation to go ahead and unload his animal. Now, but if the owner was an elderly person or a sick person, and that's why he can't do it, then you're obligated to help him out. Now, says the Tanna Kama, mitzvah in the Torah lifrik, the mitzvah from the Torah to unload an animal, but not to load the animal, which Gemara is going to explain exactly what does that mean, that there's no mitzvah when it's clearly in the Torah that it says there's a mitzvah to load up an animal. Shimon, he says that af litain, no, even to load up an animal, there is a mitzvah in the Torah. He says a different halach. He says, if there was too much that the animal was loaded up, so then in zakulai, then you don't have an obligation to go ahead and unload the animal. Krishna says in the pasuk tachas masai that you have to help him out from beneath its load. What's masai? Should say masa. Masai, its load is masa sheyochalamid, but a load that it could stand. But if it's too heavy of a load, you have no chiyuv of unloading the animal. Now, explaining the opening halacha of our Mishnah, which he spoke about that if you find it in the barn, that you have no obligation to return the animal. So Amar Rabba says, Refesh Amru. This barn that we spoke about, that we mentioned in the Mishnah, is talking about that Eina Masa. It's not causing the animal to run away from being inside, but at the same time, Ve'eina Mishameres. It's not protected, it's not locked. So if it wants to leave a kali, but there's nothing forcing it to leave. How does he know it's this middle case? So he explains like this: in a masa, it can't be that it's causing it to get lost. Let's say if it was too hot or it was like uncomfortable, whatever it was. You can't say that because Miktani, the Mishnah told us that if you find the animal in the barn, in the chayva, you're not obligated to return it. If it was causing it to get lost, then it would be an aved, you would have to return it. Obviously, it's not causing it to get lost. Now, at the same time, you have to say that the barn Be'in Meshameres was not a protected barn. And that, Medi'itzuk Lemisni. One is from the halacha itself, and one's from the fact that you have to tell me this halacha. You have to tell me in the chayva that, you're not obligated to return it. If you think the barn was a protected barn, if you find the animal on the outside. We said in the previous daf, from Hashiv to Shivim, next word to Shivim, we said that you could return it to the guy's garden, to his ruin, whatever it is. To return it into the barn is valid. If you find it in the barn, of course you don't have to return it. Rather, we can infer that it's not protected, and that's the chiddush, that it's not an aveda, even though it's not protected. Shema Mina, that's what we see, like Rava said, that it's not causing it to get lost. At the same time, it's not protected, and still, that's not an aveda to have to return to. Now, so the Mishnah, like we mentioned, says, Matzah b'refes. If you find it in the barn, so in the chayiv, you're not obligated to return it to the owner. So, there's two versions of this next teaching. Amr Yitzchak, he qualifies, and he says, this is if the barn is toich l'tchum, is within the city limits, because but if the barn was out of the city limits, so then that sounds like that would be an aveda if you find the animal in the barn. But says the Gemara, Machal, the inference is there was two cases the Mishnah spoke about: barn that you're not obligated, and rishus ram that you are obligated. So if you're telling me that the barn is in the city limits and that's when you don't have to return it, Machal, the inference is the rishus rabim, that the other case of the Mishnah, in the street, that even if the street is in the city limits, then you're still obligated to return it, even though it's in the city limits, because that's the other case that's saying it's chayiv, which is the same. It's going to be the same case of being within the city limits. That's one version of this teaching. There are those who teach this teaching on the seifa, meaning instead of the starting point being the case of the barn, the starting case is the next case. We said in the Mishnah, if you find the animal in the street, you're obligated to return it. On that is Amr Yitzchak, he says, and this version says it, if the street is chutz l'tchum, if the street is out of the city limits and you find the animal, then you have to return, meaning, but if the street is, let's say, within the city limits, then you wouldn't have to return. An animal walking the street is not such a terrible thing if it's in the city limits. Now, but Machlav, the inference is, that must be the case of the berefes, of the barn, that's teaching us that that even if the barn is out of the city limits, that even then you're not obligated to return it because it's in the barn and it's protected. It's not protected, but it's not forcing it to leave, and then you wouldn't have to return it. That's the different versions of what would the halacha be in the barn. Is that only in the city limits, or is that even out of the city limits? Now the Mishnah told us that if the object was bebesek flowers, was in the cemetery, and the one who sees it is a kain, so he said lo yitamala, so that he doesn't have to make himself tummy to it. And some Gesais bring the word v'chulu over here, etc., because it's really going on. Even if the father commanded him, says, Tzadiko, go in and get that lost object, or don't return this lost object when it's not in the cemetery. We said you don't listen to him. So, elaborating on this theme, in the Brisa, from where do we know Shem Amalai Aviv, if his father tells him, when this guy's a Kayin, Hitami, I want you to become Tami, return this guy's lost object. Or he tells a regular Yisrael, let's say Al Taxa, don't return this lost object. Shloi Shamalei, that you don't listen to him. How do you know this? It says the Pasuk Yikra. It says, Ish, a man, Imai v'aviv tiro. His father and his mother he shall fear. And says, V'eshab tishmoiru, and the same Pasuk it says, and my Shabbasis you should keep ani Hashem. What's the Pasuk teaching you? To tell you, Kulchem chayav mechvedi. Hashem is saying, you're all obligated in my honor. So meaning, even though I told you have to fear your father, but I'm the master over both of you. If your father says something to violate my words, let's say to be Mechal Shabbos, don't listen to him. And therefore, that's why you see that if he tells you to do an Isser, not to do a Shabbos Aved, or to go into the basic verse, you don't listen to him. The Gemara wonders, says, wait a second, why do you need this limud? You tell me time because the reason is because you have the drush that we said, that even though I told you to fear your father, but I also told you to keep my Shabbos, but if let's say we didn't have this pasuk, Havamina, you're saying I would have said Tzaisele that you listen to the father. Why? Because the mitzvah say of kibbut aveim would override the loisa say of leisuchel of not turning a blind eye. We know asay dechalese, father honoring the father commandment. It would override negative prohibition of not turning a blind away. But that's not just a loisa say. But my hi say yes, okay, listening to your father is a positive commandment. But hi loisa say via say. A lost object is a positive and a negative because there's hashav deshivim, which is a positive, and leisuchel l'sam, which is a negative. And we know that Allah is a positive commandment of the father of kibbut aveim cannot override a negative and a positive. So why do you need a pasuk of a shabsaisai? Why would I have thought to say that you would do it in the first place? Because the Itzrach know it was necessary to have the special limud. So you would have thought to say, since the honor of parents is equated with the honor of God with Exeris Shava, because both of them use the terminology of kabed es. Shnemekan says over in Shemais, kabed es avicha v'semecha, honor your father and your mother. But Nemalan says in Pasuk Mishlei, kabed es Hashem oinecha, honor Hashem from your assets, which Taisa points out why you're picking a pasuk from Mishlei. You could have picked a pasuk in the Torah of Ish Imay Tiro, and it says Hashem Lakecha Tira. It says Tira by both of them. So it's Taisa because the Gemara preferred to pick a pasuk regarding Kibud Avaim than Yiras Avaim, because it's talking about regarding listening to him, and that was from Kibud. But be that as it may, Hukach L'tzayis. Later I would have thought to say maybe you should listen to him, even if it's to violate a negative prohibition and a positive commandment because of the special halacha of Kibud Avaim. That's why we needed the pasuk of Ani Hashem, Deloy L'shamalei. You don't listen to your father or your mother when they tell you to violate a mitzvah. Now the Mishnah said, Mitzvah minat Torah lifrik. So you have to at least see these nice pictures. So it's a mitzvah to help someone unload his animal. And then there's the mitzvah of tina, of loading up an animal. Like we said in the Mishnah, you have to do it even 4 or 5 times. Now, this is the El to the Yidel. Then you have to do it even though he's sitting over here. But the Tanna Kama says, yeah, the mitzvah minat Torah to unload, but not to load up the animal. That is no mitzvah. Says what does it mean not to load up the animal? If you really mean to say there's no mitzvah of loading up an animal at all, what do you mean? Why would you say there's a mitzvah to unload the chesed? Because in the Azav Tazbima you shall surely help him unload his animal. Well, Tina Nami, loading the pasuk also says in the Vam Hakim Takim Imoy, you shall surely help him load up the animal. How could you say there's no mitzvah to Pitayin? Ella rather says the Gemara, no mitzvah that Torah lifrik bechinam. There's a mitzvah from the Torah to unload for free. Meaning you see a guy's animal, you can't ask him for money. But when you say there's no mitzvah of loading up to do for free, ella b'schar, rather the guy has to pay you for the work of loading up the animal. On that is Rabbi Shimon he disagrees. Says no af litem bechinam, that even the mitzvah of loading up the animal is also done for free. Now the Gemara says that Tanina, this halacha of our Mishnah, the way we just explained it, is supports Lahadatan Rabban that we learned in the Brisa, which says this interpretation. The Tanakam is quoted as saying explicitly, Prika b'chinam, to unload is for free. Tina b'schar, to load up, you get paid. Shemon says no, Zobaz b'chinam, both of them you have to do for free. So the Gemara wonders, my time Rabbanan, what's the reason Rabbanan? Why would they differentiate? Why would you say pink mitz in the Torah, the guy has to get paid for loading but not for unloading? Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. These are good. I think if you think like Rabbi Shimon, that both loading and unloading have to be done for free. So why do you say both psukim? Just mention loading up an animal. I wouldn't have to say about unloading. And I would say like this: if loading up an animal, there's no pain to the animal. But like a chazar kiss, which is this week's parasha tzav, kiss, there's a loss of money because the animal is breaking under its load. Meaning if you don't load up the animal, there's no chesar and kiss. Chayiv, still you're obligated to do it for free. So prika, then unloading the isbut balchem, there's a pain in the animal. And chesar and kiss, the loss of money where the animal is being crushed beneath the load. Like koshkin is all the more so. So then why is the Torah mentioning the mitzvah of prika and tina? I don't need to say prika. I know it's from tina. To tell you prika b'chinam. Tell you yes, I have to mention explicitly because unloading is for free, whereas tina, loading up the animal is only commanded only b'schar to tell you that you get paid. So therefore, if we had not written Prika, and it would have been learned out from a Kavacham from Tina, I would have said, I love and then Lee's Canadian, that you can't learn that more than what is learned out from. I would have said, just like loading up, you get paid, also unloading, you get paid. So I had to say Prika individually to say that no, you don't get paid by Prika. That's why they disagree with Reb Shimon. So that's what Reb Shimon says. So what's the reason, Reb Shimon? Taka, why do you have to write Prika if they're both for free? Come from a Kavacham from Tina. Says the Gemara, the reason why is because according to Reb Shimon, it's not clear which pasuk would mean the loading. If I would have written one pasuk, I would have said that's referring to unloading, because that's the one that's Tabal Chayim, Kiss. I wouldn't know which pasuk. I need to write both pasukim because to tell you that they're both for pre-cantina. But Rabban, they said, what do you mean? Why are you saying it's not definitive which pasuk it is? It says in the pasuk, it's laying beneath its load. Sounds like you have to unload it. And in the other pasuk says they fell on the road, which they fell sounds like Dirama Inu Bituunayu Ba'urchamash, but it sounds like they're both on the ground. The load is also on the ground, and what do you have to do? You have to help it load it up. So it's clear which pasuk is which. So why are you saying both pasukim? Shimon, he would tell you that no, Neiflim Aderech. What does it mean they fell on the road? It doesn't mean that they fell, meaning they're both individually on the road. It would mean individuayu alavayumash. It would sound like the animal with the load on it, they fell together, and you could still say it means prika, not te'ina. I still wouldn't know there's a mitzvah of te'ina. If you have to write the other pasuk, which is clearly prika, say there is pasuk that's going to be te'ina. But I would not have known it had I just written this pasuk itself. That's why, according to Shimon, you're right. They're both bechinam, but I had to write both because I would not have known which one is pre-cantina. Amar Rava makes a diuk as you continue to base. He says, "Midivrei shnehem," from the words of both opinions, meaning both of them agree that prika, unloading the animal, is better. So from both of them, Nilma, we could learn the tabal cham deraisa. That must be that painting an animal is a biblical precept, because if I feel Reb Shimon, even Reb Shimon, Lo Kama, he didn't say that you need to write a pasuk for prika, meaning that you would not have known it from a kavacham from Tina. Even he is Elam Mishum Delay Misami Kroy, only because it's not clear which pasuk would mean loading up an animal. But Misami Kroy, if it would have been definitive that you have a pasuk for loading up an animal, he agrees there Shini Kabachaimer would have learned the Kabachaimer unloading from loading. Obviously, Mishumai, why? Why is it Kabachaimer? Isn't because the pain of the animal that we expounded, we would say, well, if loading up an animal there's no tabal chaim yechai, even the Torah, so unloading with the tabal chaim isn't a kosher. Well, that's a kabacham deraisa. Obviously, it's a biblical precept about tabal chaim, about painting an animal. Says, well, no, it's not a right. That's only one variable. There's another variable. Maybe the kabachim would be a different stringency that Prika has, which is a loss of money. And this is what we would say. Mat'ina. If we find by loading up an animal, where there's no loss of money, you're obligated to help him out. So unloading with there's a loss of money, the animal's getting ruined by being crushed under this load. Like Koshkin isn't all the more so. That's what the Kavacham would have been. You don't have a right that Tabal Chaim is deraisa. Says the Gemara, wait a second. So if that's the only variable, the Tina is that really so? That loading up an animal does not have a loss of money? Mila is kinan. In other words, like Rashi explains, don't you think the pasuk is also referring to if a guy is on his way for a big delivery of merchandise, that the hachi, if he's going to delay where he can't get the load up onto his animal, he's going to lose out from the fear from the market day, and it's going to be a loss of money for him. Or inami, or also asagamvi. It's like you're just sitting. It's like a sitting duck over there. All your merchandise, all your watches, all your things they're laying on the floor. Thieves are going to come, they come out day by day, and they can take whatever is over there. So of course, te'ina could also be chesar and kiss. So what would the kabel chaimer be? As we saw, both Rabban and Reb Shimon agreed there's a kabel chaimer. Obviously, it's because of tabel chaim. I think what says Teza, you should know that the Rabbanan that disagree with Reb Shimon and Reb Shimon, the two opinions we mentioned, yes, that obviously they hold tabel chaim deraisa, that it is a biblical concept. Why? Because in Tani Seifa, the next opinion mentioned in the Mishnah is Rabbi Yisrael Omer. He said, if there was way too much load up onto this animal, the guy did not follow instructions about load for this animal. So he said, in Zakala, you have no responsibility to help him out. Why? Because it says in Pasuk in Shemais, Tachas Masa'oi, only if he's laying beneath his load, a load that he could withstand. But if it's not, then you don't have to. Now that's Rabbi Yisrael Glili. Lav Machlal, isn't it inferred that the Tanakama, meaning the first Tanoim of Rabbi Yisrael Glili, meaning Rabban and Rabbi Shimon that we mentioned right before, obviously some of they hold that even so, Zalkagloi, that they disagree. They hold that you would have to help him out. Oh, my timer. Well, why do they have to help him out? If it's because of Azav Taziv, but it says Masa'ai, which is only a load that's fit to put on. Must be Lav Mishum, isn't it? Because it's Abachayim Deraisa. Because of the biblical precept of, okay, the guy did wrong. You don't really have to help him because of Azav Taziv, but you have to help him because of Tzar Balachayim, because the animal's in pain. Says no, not necessarily. Let's discuss what's the Havmin and the Maskana. That Dilma maybe Tzar Balachayim is not Deraisa. But Tachas Masai Pligi, they actually disagree on the drush itself of Tachas Masai. The B'yisi he holds the Shin Tachas Masai that there is such a drasha of his load, which is Master Shechlam, but only you have to help him out if it's a load that he can withstand. They don't expound the word Masai for a load that's fit for him. Because they learn Masai means, yeah, his load, whatever load is on top of him. And therefore, that's why you have to. So it's not a raya that they hold because of Tzar Balachayim. They hold you don't have an exemption of the word of how you're darshing Masai. And actually, the Gemara does a reversal. The Gemara says, Teda, you should know that it is like I told you, that I rejected, and actually the Tzar Balachayim loved their Raisa, that actually everyone holds not like Rava, that the pain of the animal is not a biblical precept. Because the Tani Reisha, because what does the Reisha teach? The Reisha says, Halach v'yashav loy, if the guy just goes and sits down, he tells him, look, it says our Mishnah that says, look, you have a mitzvah to unload, you go unload. So the Mishnah says pater. Then you don't have to help him. Shalem it says, Imai with him. Says the Gemara, but if you're going to think to say, that the pain of the animal is a biblical precept, okay, who cares if the mass is with him? Who cares if the mass is not with him? Forget about Azav Tasev. You have a halachic obligation because of Tzar Balachayim. So if the guy goes and sits down like this picture is, he's just sitting and he's reading the Yated, but you should still have an obligation to help him out because of the animal. Says the Gemara, no, that's not a raya. That Tzar Balachayim is lav deraisa. Loyam Tzar Balachayim deraisa. I can tell you that actually paying the animal is a biblical obligation. Misavid pater pater. Do you think when the Mishnah said that when the guy sits down, he's like, I'm not doing anything, you could do the mitzvah, did we meant you're exempt, totally exempt? No, but dima pater b'chinam. Maybe, although generally when you do perik, when you unload the animal, you have to do it for free. Here we're saying you're exempt from doing it for free. He has to pay you now if he's just sitting there on the side. Welcome, Rahman. This is what the Torah is saying. When the master's imay, like the Torah says, imay, they have to do it for free. If the master is not there, then avid gabe, then you do it for him. Yes, because it's Tzar Balachayim, but forcibly you're going to take b'schar with pay, and therefore Tzar Balachayim. The right, it could be the pain of the animal is biblical because you do have an obligation, but you don't have an obligation of Azat Tazim anymore. If you could charge him for the work that you're doing, so there's no raya. So the Gemara now tries to bring several other proofs with the simon in the manig of behemas, oyev, soine, rabtzim, which just refers to different cases that we're going to attempt to bring a raya of Tzar Balachayim Zeraisa or not. Says the Gemara, let's say we could support Rava, who said before that the pain of a living creature is a biblical concept. In the following brisa, brisa says it gets a little bit complicated regarding what these cases are. Behemas oyev kachavim, the animal of a non-Jew, metapelba, you have to be involved to unload the load to Behemas Yisrael, just like an animal of a Jew. So says, wait a second. Yeah, if you say like Rabba that the pain of an animal is a biblical concept, that's why it doesn't make a difference whose animal it is. The animal is not Jewish or not. The animal is a living creature. You have to unload the animal. But if you say the pain of the animal is not a biblical concept, so why do you have to unload the non-Jew's animal? But as the Jew's animal, obviously it's a biblical concept. Says no. That's simply because of a social mitzvah that the Rabbanan introduced called enmity, which is hatred. That if you see all the Jews are lined up, they have this blue and white flag on them, you're unloading them, and these other colorful flags that you're not unloading is going to cause hatred, and therefore that's why there's an obligation to unload also theirs too. The Gemara says, it's actually logical to say, as you're saying, that's only because of Eva, not because of Tzar Balachayim. Because the Seifa of the Brisa says like this: if let's say the animal was laden with forbidden wines, like yayin esach, forbidden wines, Ein zakala, then says the Brisa, you don't have to be involved in unloading the animal. So says the Gemara, whoa. If you say like what we're saying, that it's not biblical, and the whole reason why you have to unload the non-Jews animals because of Ava, because of hatred, so it makes sense that you don't have to be busy with it, because you could tell him and you could get out of it by saying, Ishmael, this is forbidden for us. This is yayin nesach. This is our Torah doesn't allow this. So it's not going to cause hatred because it's your Sabbath, it's your touch a woman, whatever. They understand it, and that's only if it's. But Eli Amr deraisa. But if you said Tzar B'Chaim is biblical, who cares that it's yayin nesach? You still have Tzar B'Chaim deraisa. So obviously Tzar B'Chaim is lav deraisa. The Gemara says no, it's not a raya. Hachikama. This is what the Bryce is saying. Truth is, I can tell you Tzar B'Chaim is deraisa. The Reish that said that you have to be busy with the animal it didn't say it explicitly, but like the way Rashi explains what the Gemara is trying to say, it was talking about both unloading and loading. Unloading because of Tzar B'Chaim, and loading is because of Ava, because you have to load up a Jew's animal. The non-Jews are going to feel hatred that you're not helping them load up their animals. But that's what the Bryce is saying, that ulatina yayin aser, but to load up prohibited wines where there's no Tzar B'Chaim, because it's off the animal, and there's also no Ava, because he realizes it's not kosher wines, that it's forbidden in your Torah. That's where in Zakula. That's where you don't have to. But like Taisa says, but other things, you would have to, even to load up because of Ava. But it was on the Ava part of loading, not of unloading. Because unloading, you're right, you would have to, because maybe Tzar B'Chaim is the Raya. So there's no Raya. Okay, so let's try to bring another Raya. Tashema, let's bring a Raya that Tzar B'Chaim is not the Raisa from the following Brisa. The Brisa says, Behemes oivik uchavim. If let's say, this is a little bit more complex. If let's say you have a non-Jew's animal, but a Masa Yisrael, the load is a Jew's load. So this guy is working for Amazon back in the 1600s, and he's coming with the non-Jewish animal. I mean, it's the animal of a non-Jew, but it's a Jew's package. So on that says the Brisa, the word of the pasuk v'chadalta. What's v'chadalta? So the pasuk in Shemais Chav Gimel says, if you're going to see the donkey of your enemy laying beneath its load, so really what the pasuk means to say is, v'chadalta ma'azav, you can hold back from helping him. No, azur tazvim, you should surely help him. But the way it could be read, the way we said it by Hashavas Aveda v'salamta, it really sounds like v'chadalta, that you could refrain from helping him. So this would be such a case. If the non-Jew's animal, the Jew's load, you don't have to help unload the animal. Now, says the Gemara, but if you say the pain of the animal is a biblical halacha, why are you saying you could refrain? It should say you should surely help. Because forget about who's the owner. We're talking about the animals in pain. Says the Gemara, it's not a raya. I can tell you that the pain of the animal is biblical. Hasam over there, when you're exempting, when it's the animal of a non-Jew, is referring to b'te'ina, loading up the animal, which Gemara is going to ask later on. Said the pasuk of a chadalta is written in the context of prika, not of te'ina. That's the pasuk. Okay, but for now, that's what the Gemara is answering. Okay, so loading up, fine. It's a non-Jewish animal, so then you don't have to do it, and there's no Tzar B'Chaim. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, that's loading up the animal. Well, Emer Sefer. Well, look at the next case. The Brisa says the flip. Behemas Yisrael. If it's a Jew's animal, and it's a non-Jew's package, so the Jew is Amazon, and he's bringing a non-Jew's package, and it's way down beneath the load, then azatazim. Then you have to help. Says, well, wait a second. If it's about loading up, why are you helping? But it's a non-Jew's package. So why do you have to help load up the non-Jew's package? Says, yeah, Mishum Tzar the Yisrael, because the owner of the animal is a Jew. So even though it's a non-Jewish package, but he's in pain, he's like, I got to deliver this to Mark, and I can't get this on. So that's why you have to help him. So you say, wait a second. If you're concerned about helping a Jew, even though it's not all his, as long as, let's say, he's the owner of the animal, even though the package is not his, then even the other case, when the Jew's package and it's a non-Jew's animal, why don't you have to help out over there? Think Shmili is waiting for his watch, which Mark is delivering on his animal. So why don't you have to help Mark get Shmili's package up onto the animal? Says Gemara, no. Reisha, the case of the Reisha is Bachamor Oivekachava. The donkey driver himself, besides the animal's owner being non-Jewish, the donkey driver himself is a non-Jew. Now Shmili, the owner of the package, he's not there. So it's the non-Jew's responsibility to somehow figure out to get it loaded up. So you're not responsible to help out there. There's no Jew there at all. Not the owner of the donkey is not Jewish, and not the donkey driver. The package is owned by a Jew, but that's their achrais. Let Mark figure this out. Seifa, however, where we said that the animal's owner was Jewish, is also B'chamar Yisrael. The donkey driver himself is Yankel. So that's what we're saying. Also, Tazav, you have to help Yankel load up Mark's package onto Shmili's animal. So that you have responsibility because the donkey driver himself needs help and he's Jewish. So it says my paskas. How do you make this line in the sand that every non-Jewish owned animal, the donkey driver himself is a non-Jew, but the Jewish animal's owner, I mean, if the animal's owner is Jewish, then the donkey driver is also Jewish? Meaning, because you're saying it's about the driver, how do you know that? Because the case of the animal's owner is not Jewish, so the donkey driver is also not Jewish. Except for you don't have to help him load up. But when the owner animal is Jewish, then his quarterback is also Jewish. Like what? How do you know that it's the same thing? So yes, so generally we could presume that a man goes based on his donkey. So meaning to say that we're going to say that whoever the owner is, that's who the donkey driver is, and therefore we have explained why when the animal's owner is Jewish, then the donkey driver is also Jewish, versus when it's not Jewish, then the donkey driver is also not Jewish, so then there's no Jew involved. You don't have to help out. Versus when the donkey driver is Jewish, then you have to help out. The problem is that you explained all along how to be miyashiv this, that you don't have to help, even though Tzar B'chaim is deraisa, when it's not Jewish. He said it's not about unloading, it's about loading. But we had mentioned, Rashi had referenced this question before, but v'chadalta, but this v'chadalta and v'azatazev b'priku dechsev is about unloading, not about loading. How could you explain the brisa about loading up when the words of the pasuk that the brisa is quoting, as azav tazev and chadalta, when you have to, when you don't have to, is about unloading, not loading. So right, the Gemara falls off the approach we tried saying. It says a very easy answer. Amalei says you're right. The brisa seems to be indicating that it's talking about unloading, and still, if it's a non-Jewish animal, you don't have to unload it. So that seems to prove Tzar B'chaim is lav deraisa. But Haman, you know what the town of the brisa is? He says explicitly in our Mishnah that when you have too much of a load, you don't have to unload the animal. He says Tzar B'chaim lav deraisa. But you can't prove what would be the halacha regarding the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon, what they would hold. He says when it's tachas masai, only a masai that it can withstand. If the owner put up a load that's too much, you don't have to help him. Tzar B'chaim. No, he holds Tzar B'chaim lav deraisa. But it wouldn't prove regarding everyone, all the other Tanai. So it's not a raya, because we could just say it's basically. Someone say, okay, let's try to bring another raya that's not the raya in the next brisa. What happens if there's two animals? You have your oyev, you meet your best friend Baruch, and he has his animals weighing down Lifrik. He needs help. He says, Aaron, come here. I need you to help me unload my animal. But your enemy, this Chaim Kol, he needs help loading up his animal. There's a famous teaching, says the Brisa, mitzvah b'soine. The mitzvah is to go to your enemy, help him load up his animal, that you subdue your inclination. I mean, you have a Yetzer Hara, you have your bad inclination, and you have this enemy. So to subdue that inclination, better go to your enemy to load up the animal than to unload your friend's animal. Now, says Gemara, wait a second. If you think to say that the concept of the animal's pain is a biblical ha'adafle, definitely unloading your friend, even though we want to work on our midas, but if it's a biblical precept over here, of course you would unload your friend. Obviously, that Tzar B'Chaim is lav deraisa. Says the Gemara, no. Afilachi, even so, says the Gemara, huge chiddush, that even if Sar B'Chaim is deraisa, kedei lochav es yitzri adav, to subdue your inclination, we see how powerful is this idea of subduing your inclination, is better than the mitzvah sasei deraisa of Tzar B'Chaim. Which Taisus on the bottom of Lochav Yitzri, he asks, wait a second, the Gemara Av B'Sachim tells us that there's that this pasuk of your Sinai is referring to a Jew that you're allowed to hate. For example, let's say you saw him doing a Dvar Erva, something licentious. So how could it pertain to subdue your inclination if you're actually allowed to hate him? The Taisus says, no, the truth is our Bryce is not talking about the Sinai of the pasuk. The Sinai of the pasuk, when you see Sirah Chamor Sanacha, you're right, that's talking about someone you're allowed to hate. When we said, when you have your best friend to unload and your enemy to load, it doesn't mean that you saw him doing something. You just hate him. And you guys are on bad terms. To be Lochav is Yitzray, you're going to do the loading of your enemy first, and it's not a raya that Tzar B'Chaim is lav deraisa. It could even be ivitz deraisa. You would still do it first. The Gemara says, okay, Tashma tried to bring another raya that's not deraisa, because the Brisa says Sainish Amru. So the Gemara thinks right now, when the Brisa is qualifying the enemy that we said is going the enemy of the pasuk, which the pasuk is talking about unloading an animal. It says Kisur Chamor Sanacha, when you're going to see the donkey of your enemy, that's rabbits, etc. It's laying beneath its load. You have to help it out. So the Brisa seems to be saying that the enemy that we said in the pasuk is Soni Yisrael, is a Jew that you hate. But it's not talking about a non-Jew that you hate. A non-Jew that you hate, you don't have a chiyuv of unloading his animal. So well, wait a second. But if you say that the pain of animal is a biblical concept, who cares if he's Jewish or not? You would still have an obligation to unload the non-Jewish enemy that you have. So why are you saying it's only by a Jewish enemy? Which Taisus really says, the Gemara could have answered, you're right, it's just that a Jew you have to do for free and the non-Jew you have to do for pay. But the Gemara gives a different answer. The Gemara says, no, me Sabbath saying the krako, you think we're talking about the enemy of the pasuk? Asayim the mesnidiko, we're talking about the enemy of the brisa that we just brought before. We said that if you have a friend to unload and the enemy to load, we force you to work on your midas and first load up your enemy, then your friend of unloading. That enemy that we want you to work on your midas for is a Jew that you hate, not a non-Jew. And as Taisus qualified it further, it's a Jew that you're not allowed to hate. A Jew that you're allowed to hate, that might be different also. But Al Kapanim, it's not a raya because you're right. It could be the enemy of the pasuk would be even the non-Jew because you would have a mitzvah to unload it simply because of Tzar B'Chaim, the raisa. So it's not a raya that Tzar B'Chaim is lav the raisa. Thank you to any time.